Hello and welcome to this brief training session for using the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, more commonly called the MoCA. We will be focusing on the MoCA-Blind, which is suitable for use over the telephone. My name is Marie Prince. I'm a clinical psychologist and team lead at the Young Onset Dementia Service. You will also hear from my colleague, Dr. Elaine Mafiri, a clinical psychologist with the Older People's Psychology Services, and we have Anna Galani assisting with the slides. Before you start the training, you may find it useful to have a copy of the MoCA-Blind test and the administration and scoring instructions in front of you. You can register for an account and download the tools at www.mocatest.org. You should download version 8.1, which is the latest test. Clinical psychologists and psychiatrists can download the MoCA-Blind by ticking the Exempt from Training box on the MoCA Test website. Other staff, including CPNs and occupational therapists, can sign the declaration to decline training. This is on the understanding that you are experienced in administering cognitive screening tools. You must also have completed the NES ACE-III online trainer. Please Google NES ACE trainer to access this. You must also complete this training and be administering the MoCA-Blind as part of a multidisciplinary assessment where you will have access to support and supervision. Anyone who is trained and experienced in cognitive screening can administer the MoCA-Blind. Only staff with significant expertise in cognition should interpret the results. Over the course of this brief training, we will outline why you may need to use the MoCA-Blind and give you some background information about it. We will demonstrate use of the tool and review some of the key points regarding administration and scoring. So firstly, what is the MoCA? The MoCA is a widely used screen available in about 100 languages. It has been validated in individuals aged 55 to 85 years old. It can be administered repeatedly with minimal learning effects. The MoCA-Blind is an adapted version of the original MoCA. It is brief and suitable for telephone administration. It was originally developed to assess mild cognitive impairment and dementia in people with a visual impairment. As such, it has no visually presented information, which makes it an ideal assessment to use over the phone. It contains the same items as the original MoCA, except those requiring visual abilities. The MoCA-Blind assesses different cognitive domains: memory, attention, language, executive function, delayed recall, and orientation. It takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes to administer. So why do we need to use the MoCA-Blind? Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, face-to-face contacts may not be possible or may not be the preferred option for some patients. Even as face-to-face appointments resume with appropriate PPE, many older people and younger people with complex health problems will continue to shield or significantly restrict their face-to-face contact. This poses challenges for memory clinics and mental health services. Cognitive screening is an essential part of the assessment of cognitive difficulties. The ACE-III is the cognitive screening tool of choice in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. If use of digital platforms such as Attend Anywhere is possible, the ACE-III can be administered remotely. For further information about the remote administration of the ACE-III, please contact your local clinical psychologist. However, we are aware that many people do not have access to the necessary digital equipment or do not feel comfortable and confident to engage in a video call assessment. In these cases, a telephone assessment using the MoCA-Blind can be offered. There are a number of factors that would mean remote cognitive assessment may be unsuitable, such as if the patient has a known learning disability, when English is not the patient's first language, If the patient appears to be sedated to the extent that it's unlikely they can attend properly. If the patient is delirious or experiencing hallucinations. If the patient is distressed about completing the test. If the patient states they do not wish to complete the test. Consent must be obtained prior to administration. If you are familiar with the ACE-III, you will already have skills and knowledge directly relevant in the administration of the MoCA-Blind. The current training aims to offer you an opportunity to get familiar with the MoCA-Blind prior to using this in clinical practice. You will recognise many of the items included, as similar items are also part of the ACE-III. As such, it is expected that anyone experienced in the administration of the ACE-III will be able to use the MoCA-Blind after completing this online training. If you have limited or no experience of cognitive screening, you should observe a colleague administering the MoCA-Blind and ensure that you have access to supervision and support. Irrespective of previous experience, please ensure that you have also completed the NES ACE-III trainer, as this is a prerequisite for the MoCA-Blind online training. Before you administer a MoCA-Blind, you must ensure that the client consents to further assessment over the telephone and arrange an appointment as per your local protocol. You must ensure that the client can provide informed consent to partake in the assessment. This means explaining why you would like the patient to complete the cognitive screen, discuss the possible outcomes from the assessment, and state that the patient can stop at any time. In addition, give consideration to practical issues related to conducting the assessment over the phone. Importantly, discuss with the patient if they have a hearing impairment. Explore if this could impact on their ability to hear the instructions and negatively affect their test performance. Ensure the patient will have access at the agreed time to a telephone in a quiet room in their house without interruptions. Discuss the importance of minimising, where possible, background noise, such as noise from the television, radio, and other people in the house. Consider if the phone line is clear with a strong signal. Discuss with the patient, and where relevant with the carer too, the importance of privacy during the assessment. Ask if the client will have someone to support them should they feel distressed during the cognitive screen. Assuming that the client consents to the assessment and you feel they will be able to undertake it, you are ready to begin. I will now hand over to Eleni to demonstrate the administration, scoring and key learning points.
Thank you, Marie. So for this part of the training, it will be very useful to have a copy of the MoCA-Blind and also the administration guide in front of you. As you can see on the slide, the MoCA-Blind has 6 domains: memory, attention, language abstraction, delayed recall, and orientation. We will role play with Marie each domain in turn. Marie will role play the patient and I will role play the examiner. After each sub-test in every domain, we will stop and we will just highlight some tips and some common errors to avoid. Please remember that the MoCA-Blind is a standardized cognitive screen, so the assessment is only valid when the test is administered using the exact instructions. You will find the instructions in the administration guide. Make sure that you have this in front of you during your telephone assessment. Read out the questions and the instructions word by word. As Marie mentioned, you must start the telephone call by introducing yourself and saying where you're calling from, and just checking that the patient is still happy to go ahead with the telephone assessment. You must let the patient know that they're not write down any of the instructions or keep any notes, and they shouldn't get any help from somebody else. We will now demonstrate the first part of the MoCA test. So I'll pick up my phone and say, I suppose, hello Marie, this is Elaine Morfiri, clinical psychologist here. I'm calling you from the Woodlands Clinic in Kirkintilloch. We had arranged to do the brief memory test today. Can I check with you that this is still okay?
Yes, of course.
Excellent. Marie, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, really clear.
Very good, I can hear you too. Could I also check that there is no background noise, that all radios, TVs are switched off?
Yeah, all fine, yeah.
That's fantastic. Very good. So before we begin, I just wanted to check with you how many years of formal education you have.
Oh, let me think. I've got a degree, you know, so it must be 15 or 16 years or so.
Excellent, thank you, Marie. So I suppose at this point, make a little note on the top, just to recall how many years of education the person had, and also add the rest of the details, the name, the date of the assessment, and so on. So we're going to start now by demonstrating the memory part of the test. This tests the ability of the patient to learn. It is essentially a list of 5 words. Marie, this is a memory test. I'm going to read a list of words that you will have to remember now and later on. Listen carefully. When I'm through, tell me as many words as you can remember. It doesn't matter in what order you say them. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Face, daisy, church, velvet, red.
Red, velvet, church, that's it. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Marie. I'm now going to read the same list for a second time. Try to remember and tell me as many words as you can, including the ones you said before. Face, daisy, church, velvet, red.
Red velvet, church, daisy.
Okay, thank you. I will ask you to recall those words again at the end of the test. So I suppose with these subtests, the memory domain, the patient needs to know in advance that this is a memory test. So you need to give them warning as well that you will ask them again at the end of the test. The speed of presentation is quite important, so try to read 1 word per second. If possible, make a note of the actual response that the patient gives you. Errors can give really valuable qualitative information. Read the word list twice in all cases. Even when the patient gets all 5 words in the first trial, all patients should be given 2 trials for learning prior to the delayed recall later in the test. So we will now continue with the attention domain. As you can see, the attention is made up of 3 brief tests: the digit span test, the vigilance test, and the serial 7 test. So we're going to start with the forward digit span and backward digit span. Marie, I'm going to ask you to say some numbers, and when I'm through, repeat them to me exactly as I said them. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
2, 1, 8, 5, 4.
2, 1, 854.
Very good. Now I'm going to say some more numbers, but when I'm through, you must repeat them to me in the backwards order.
Okay.
7, 4, 2.
247.
Excellent, thank you. So important things to keep in mind in both cases, same as before, read one number per second, and same as before, if you can make a note of the patient's answer, as this can provide very useful qualitative information. We're going to move on now. We're going to continue with the vigilance test. The vigilance test is a sequence of letters. Marie, could I ask you to make a tapping sound with your finger on the phone, just like this? Thank you. I'm going to read a sequence of letters. Every time I say the letter A, tap your hand once on the side of the phone. If I say a different letter, do not tap. Okay?
Okay.
F, B, A, C, M, N, A, J, K, L, B, A, F, A, K, D, A, J, A, M, O, F, A, B. Thank you, Marie. So, as we demonstrated, before you introduce this test, ask the patient to tap on the phone with their finger, just to make sure that they understand what they have to do, but also that you can hear that tap clearly. Remind them that they cannot write anything down during the test. And mark down every time that they tap on the scoring sheet as you go, as you need to know afterwards how many errors they have made. We will now demonstrate the serial 7 test. That's a brief assessment of sustained attention. Marie, now I will ask you to count by subtracting 7 from 100, and then keep subtracting 7 from your answer until I tell you to stop.
Okay, 7, okay. 93, 86, 79, 71, 64.
Okay, that's enough, thank you. So for this part of the test, it's quite important for the patient to understand the instructions. If you think that they may have not followed, or if they ask you, just repeat the instructions. Please note when you do the scoring for the serial 7 that every subtraction is rated independently. That is, if the patient responds with an incorrect number but continues to subtract 7 from it, then they get a point for every correct subtraction. Patients are not allowed to use any aids, so no calculators, pen or paper for this test. There is a maximum score of 3 for this test, so use the scoring guide to rate the patient's performance. We will now continue with the next domain, which is language. This has 2 brief tests, sentence repetition and a fluency test. Sentence repetition. Marie, I'm going to read you a sentence. Repeat it after me exactly as I said. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I only know that John is the one to help today.
I only know that John is the one to help today.
Thank you. And now I'm going to read you another sentence. Repeat it after me exactly as I said. Okay?
Okay.
The cat always hid under the couch when dogs were in the room.
The cat always hid on the couch when the dog was in the room.
Excellent. Thank you, Marie. So I suppose with this one, it's important to read the instructions prior to reading both sentences. It may seem a little bit repetitive, but this way you will ensure that the patient remembers for the first and the second sentence what they are supposed to do. If you can, stress the word exactly, because they only get the point if they repeat word by word what you've said, and give 1 point for every correct sentence. We will now move on to letter fluency. Marie, tell me as many words as you can think of that begin with a certain letter of the alphabet that I will tell you in a moment. You can say any kind of word you want, except for proper nouns like Bob or Boston, numbers, or words that begin with the same sound but have a different suffix. For example, love, lover, loving. I will tell you to stop after exactly 1 minute. Are you ready?
Yes, yeah.
Excellent. I'll have my timer just here. So now tell me as many words as you can think of that begin with the letter F.
F. F, okay. Let me think. F. 4. Flower, flowery, floral, flower, find, fit, and foot, football. Let me think. Fruit, Freddie, flower, folk, Freddie, flower, feeble, flower. Oh, I think I've said that. Oh, I don't know.
You can stop now. Thank you very much for that. Right. So there were 13 words in this list, but flower was repeated. Freddie is a proper noun, and you cannot count foot and football. So there are actually 10 correct responses, meaning that Marie, in that case, would get 0 points. That demonstrates that actually it's quite important to make a note of a client's actual responses and not just the number of words that they produce within that minute. You may want to make a note at the end and at the back of the MoCA copy that you've got in front of you. Really, really useful, because the kind of errors that the patient makes, repetitions or rule violations, they can give us very important clinical information. They can also help with accurate scoring. It's also quite important to make sure that the patient understands the rules and to read out the full instructions and stress that they should not give you any nouns, numbers, or derivative words. Again, I suppose it can be quite tempting to simplify the rules and to use something really short for instructions, like tell me as many words as you can beginning with the letter F. but because rule violations give us such important clinical information, for correct evaluation, the patient needs to know the rules in advance. So we will now continue with the next domain, which is abstraction. We will demonstrate this with Marie just now. Marie, I will give you 2 words and I would like you to tell me what category they belong to. An orange and a banana.
They're both food.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me another category to which these items belong to?
They're both tasty.
Mm-hmm. They are. They also belong to the category fruits. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you tell me to what category the next couple of words belong to? Train, a train and a bicycle.
Vehicles.
Excellent. A ruler and a watch.
They measure things.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. So when it comes to scoring this one, only the last 2 pairs are scored. 1 point is given for each pair correctly answered. The following responses are acceptable for train, bicycle, means of transportation, or means of traveling. Or people can say you take trips in both. For ruler and watch, measuring instruments used to measure. Please note that the following responses are not acceptable. If the response for train, bicycle is they have wheels, and for ruler, watch, they have numbers. If the patient gives another answer that seems quite plausible and you're not quite sure if they should get a score or not, then have a discussion about it with a senior member of the team, like your clinical psychologist in the team or psychiatrist in the team. Just a little prompt as well, but for that section, you can give 1 prompt if none was used during the example. So if they respond correctly, for the example, an orange and a banana, and then they get stuck with the next one, you can actually prompt the patient by saying, thank you, can you tell me another category to which these items belong to? Excellent. So we can now demonstrate the next domain which is delayed recall. Marie, I read some words to you earlier, which I asked you to remember. Could you please tell me as many of those words as you can remember?
Red velvet.
Very good. So I suppose at that point, as you can see the scoring sheet on the screen, you tick each of the words correctly recalled without any clues in the relevant space. Please note that there are 2 additional rows just beneath. So if the patient fails to recall a word, then you should provide them with the category clue. And if they still fail to recall correctly, then you should give them multiple choices. The prompts for this are actually in the administration guide, so make sure you have this in front of you. So we're gonna use an example just now. Marie, I will give you some hints to see if that helps you to remember the words. The first word was a body part.
No, I don't know.
Okay, which of the following words do you think it was? Was it nose, face, or hand?
Hand.
Okay, thank you. So if the patient is still unable to recall the word with the category clue, you then provide them with a multiple choice cue. Completing the free recall as well as the queued recall trials allows you to calculate the patient's memory index score. And that is really useful clinically. It provides a lot of information about the type of memory impairment that the patients have. Patients with difficulties in retrieval are usually facilitated by queues, where patients with difficulties with storage, they're not facilitated, irrespectively of giving them queues or not. So really useful actually to complete that part of the test as well. Now we will demonstrate the last domain, which is orientation. Marie, I would like you to close your eyes and tell me today's date, day of the week, month, and year.
Wednesday, the 14th of July, 2020.
Thank you. You can open your eyes now. Could you please tell me from what clinic I'm calling you from?
The NHS.
What is the city in which the clinic is located?
Glasgow.
Thank you. Right. So I suppose for this domain, please note that the instructions for the telephone administration differ from the face-to-face. You're actually asking people to close their eyes, and that's because we don't know what cues may be available, if they've got potentially a calendar on the wall in front of them, or a newspaper just hanging about. Also, for those familiar with the ACE, please note that the scoring rules are different for the MoCA-Blind, where the ACE-III allows an error of 1 or 2 days. In the MoCA-Blind, full points are allocated only when the patient recalls the exact day. It's also quite important when you introduce yourself at the very beginning of your telephone assessment call to say to the patient where you're phoning from and to give them the name of the clinic, because you're actually going to ask them as part of the orientation for that information. Okay, we're now going to end the test. Thank you, Marie. That is the end of the test.
Oh, how did I do? Was it okay?
Yes, that was fine. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go away and score your test, and I will also need to discuss it with the team. So a member of the team will be in touch with you again to give you more information and feedback about how you did. Is that okay?
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye. Right, so once you have completed your telephone assessment, what you need to do is to carefully adapt the scores. The MoCA-Blind subscale scores are summed, and that's how you get the overall total score. The maximum for the MoCA-Blind is 22 points, and the cutoff is 18. So a score which is equal or below 18 signifies that the patient is performing below where they should for their age. A score of 19 or above is considered normal. Please know that this cutoff score is suggestive and it has not been validated. So that score that you get, it's actually indicative. It cannot be interpreted on its own as evidence of the presence or lack of cognitive impairment. So the interpretation of the MoCA-Blind should be discussed with a specialist once all aspects of the assessment are completed. So always score, I can't stress this enough, using the administration, the Score It guide. You will get potentially very familiar with the MoCA-Blind. Please continue to use the administration and scoring guide, as this can prevent errors. If you are uncertain about any aspect of the scoring, have a discussion with a colleague, and if you're still uncertain, bring it to the MDT or discuss it with a senior member of your team. Remember at the start of the test to ask how many years of formal education the patient had. For the MoCA and the MoCA-Blind, anybody who had 12 years or less of formal education, they get an additional point to their score, and with a maximum score of 22. So if they score 22, they don't get an extra point. So it's really important to ensure that you've got, you know exactly how many years of schooling and formal education the patient has had. Again, practical consideration, always score if, I suppose, with a calculator at hand and also in a quiet environment without time pressure. And once you've scored, double check. So the interpretation of the MoCA-Blind, same as the ACE-III and any other cognitive screen, these tests cannot be interpreted in isolation. The score should always be considered in the context of the patient's background and their current circumstances, their age, their educational and occupational history, their health, and their mental health are only just a few of the factors important in the interpretation. As such, inform the patient that their test will be scored at a later point and do not provide any information during your assessment call. Thank them for their effort and inform them that feedback on their performance will be provided at a later time, taking into consideration the full assessment. Maria, was there anything you would like to add?
No, not at this stage.
Right, so I suppose that brings us to the end of our brief training on the MoCA-Blind. We hope that the training has been useful. There is more information on the MoCA test website. And of course, if you've got any other queries, you can speak to the clinical